and hit record. So welcome once again to the ClearAdmit MBA application overview. This is part of a series that we're running. Again, really appreciate everyone who's joined us and love seeing where you're all tuning in from in the chat. I'm Graham. I'm going to moderate today's session. I'm the co-founder of ClearAdmit. That's all you really need to know about me, because what we really want to do is introduce our esteemed panel of admissions folks. So I'm going to just run through and welcome everyone here, starting out with Chelsea Han. And Chelsea is the Director of Admissions and Scholarship at Cornell's SC Johnson College of Business. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thanks, Graham. Really exciting to be here and so cool to see such a diverse group online with us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yeah, we're really pleased to have you. Next up, I wanted to introduce Megan Creedon, who's an Associate Director for Admissions Yield at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. Hi, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you. Great to see folks tuning in from all over the world. Thanks for making time today.
Yeah, I just saw China and Kenya, so it's really amazing to see that we have such a great group gathering today. Next up, I wanted to introduce Nicole Wilhite, and she is an Associate Director of Admissions and Student Recruitment at UNC's Kenan-Flagler School of Business. Welcome, Nicole.
Thanks, Graham. Really excited to be here and talk with you all today.
Yeah, we're really pleased to have you. Next up, we've got Katie Yielding, who's Director of Admissions at UVA Darden. Welcome, Katie.
Thanks for having us, Graham. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And in fact, to have you back, because I know several of you have done these before. And last but not least, we have Laurel Grodman, who is Assistant Dean for Admissions at the Yale School of Management. Welcome, Laurel.
Thank you, Graham. Really looking forward to it.
So let's just dive right in. The first question that I wanted to get each of you to weigh in on, and this is, I think, really important for prospects who are tuning in, is I'd love to just hear a little bit more about what you would identify as your MBA program's core values. And then if you could comment on how these values inform the way that your team approaches the process. And I just want to really underline for candidates, it's actually important to get to know these schools and to sort of understand what they're saying on their websites, because a lot of that, as you're about to hear, is reflected in the essay questions they ask, or just their approach to the admissions process. So Chelsea, let's start with you over at Cornell Johnson. What would you identify as your program's core values?
Yeah, so we actually have a few core values at Cornell: excellence, inclusion, engagement, community, and impact. And I think the two that stand out for me the most in our application are community and impact. We do have an essay that asks applicants to be reflective and thoughtful about the ways in which they see themselves getting involved here at Johnson and contributing to our community, and how they plan to make a lasting impact on this MBA community. So through that essay prompt, we're really putting a little bit more of a focus on those two core values of community and impact.
Excellent. Yeah, so I'm really glad that you went first, because that's like such a direct line connection between the program's values and then the application process. Megan, let's turn to you over at Tuck. Would you be willing to share the same?
Similar to Cornell, we have kind of distilled it down to a few words here at Tuck, which are smart, aware, accomplished, and encouraging. Those are sort of the 4 pillars that guide our review process here. We derive those words by reflecting on our community and what makes a Tuck student and a Tuck alum. So that's what we mirror in our admissions process. We do a great job on our website. I'll plus one Graham's comment earlier of breaking down where exactly in the application we look for those 4 values. Each of them map to sort of certain pieces of your application. But we have a really qualitative review process over here at Tuck. So truly, we kind of slot into 4 open text boxes your alignment with those 4 different values from different pieces of your application. Folks shine for different reasons across those 4 admissions criteria. So while you're wanting to do your best case of presenting strengths across all 4, we see strengths kind of across those as being strong candidates for Tuck.
Yeah, and thanks for reminding me about that, because I had forgotten that on the site it literally says, like, these are the values and here's how each value maps to this piece of our application process, or these pieces of our process. So it's all laid out for you. If you're interested in Tuck, very good to get familiar with that. Let's turn to Nicole at UNC Kenan-Flagler. Nicole, what about your values, well, your program's values, and how these inform the way you guys do admissions?
Absolutely. So we have 4. They all start with the letter I. Hopefully it makes it easy to remember. Integrity, inclusion, innovation, and impact. We do see quite a few people weaving them through their essay, which is wonderful, and how those 4 values speak to them as a whole. So I would say the biggest, kind of along the lines of the first one, impact is huge. Impact during school, impact around you in the classroom, and then obviously in the community as well when you go out to be an alumni. So yep, the 4 I's.
Got it. All right. I'm glad you guys all have these very easy kind of to remember, kind of words and themes here. Katie, let's turn to you at Darden. How about you guys?
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, at Darden, the core values are really around the student-centered learning, the experiential opportunities for students, really deeply aligns with the school's mission of inspiring responsible leaders through transformational learning experiences. I think you see it in our admissions process through a real people-centered, hands-on way that we work with our applicants, the types of questions that you see in the application. I know we'll get into that a little later. And then fun things like the faculty and student conversations that we host on our podcast.
Excellent. Yeah. And hopefully we'll get in a little bit I feel like there's an essay question in particular that'll be useful to hear about when you get to that section of our discussion today that sort of fits with that. Laurel, tell us a little bit about how it's done at Yale SOM and what are the values and how do they inform your process?
Sure. So at Yale SOM, I think really everything we come back to or we go to as a school comes back to our mission, educating leaders for business and society. And we take a little bit of a different tack to that within our process. I think unlike some of the alignment that my colleagues described, we actually feel as though there's no one prescriptive way in which a candidate comes into our school and will be a contributor to business and society. We instead come in sort of assuming everyone has the potential to connect with that mission and to be a leader for business and society, and you get the opportunity to determine whether you're a so-called fit at the point where you're choosing to enroll. So generally speaking, we're looking for students who are academically prepared, who are thriving in their professional settings, and who are aligned to be strong community members. And we feel like you can bring those backgrounds in so many different ways and align with our mission and values. So we put a little bit less emphasis on selecting for that particular value. There's no particular question, for instance, that will ask you how you align with our mission.
Okay, good to know. And I think I was on a panel last week actually in Chicago where we talked at length about that idea of coming into business school to be not only able to survive academically, but to thrive. And then also the experiences you bring into the classroom, like you're talking about. And then finally, the ability to sort of contribute to the business school community and get involved outside of the classroom. So all really good advice. Let's turn to the next kind of segment here that we're going to run through. And what I thought we would do is talk about, what goes into each of your applications. And I think for those tuning in, you probably have some awareness of what may go into an MBA application, but we've got a nice little sort of list on screen here. Obviously, it does vary a little bit from school to school. I'll call your attention, for example, to standardized testing. So we have listed here that you can take the GMAT, the GRE. Some schools allow you to take the executive assessment exam. Some schools allow you to submit other tests, and some might even allow you to waive a test. So it varies based on the program. But these are the main components. You might have to write essays. You'll probably have to submit a resume, some letters of recommendation. There will be an interview invariably. Sometimes it's by invitation, sometimes it's open. And again, language exam sort of varies for non-native English speakers depending on the school's policy. So these are the general kind of application basics that if you're a prospect, want to have in mind as you embark on this process. But now what I wanted to do is just give each member of our panel today a chance to kind of talk specifically about their application. And so again, we're going to just go alphabetically. So we'll start with Chelsea. Chelsea, this is the question I'm going to ask each of you really. It's like application requirements look pretty similar. I just mentioned there's some nuances, but overall, they're pretty darn similar. And so what do you think candidates should know about Cornell's application and like what's different about it in your mind?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. A couple things I think that differentiate us if you look at our application versus some of our peer school applications. The first is the option for the waiver on the GMAT or the GRE. So we do not accept the executive assessment. We only accept the GMAT or the GRE, though you do have an option to request a test waiver with your submitted application. So it's not something you would submit in advance of submitting your application. We need to see your full application and all of your materials in order to make a decision about whether or not the test waiver would be granted. I just want to take a second to say it's not for everybody. So just because it's there as an option doesn't mean that you should automatically select that. If you're taking a look at your overall academic profile, your transcripts, your majors, graduate school, if you have it, any other non-degree courses, maybe your work experience, and you feel like maybe there's some gaps or some holes in the quantitative piece of your background, you really should be thoughtful about studying for and sitting for either the GMAT or the GRE exam. The other two things that I'll highlight are really just our essays. So we're very specific with our essays, and that's really intentional. Our goals statement, it says statement because it really is effectively a statement. It's fill in the blank, and we ask applicants to identify their post-MBA immediate role, function, and company that they would, or role, industry, and company that they would like to be in, both immediately after the MBA and then longer term, thinking ahead, maybe 5 to 10 years out, where they ultimately would like to be. We do have a really brief section to explain and provide a little bit more information, but I think candidates sometimes struggle with that because they're not able to provide all of the detail that sometimes they can in some of their applications for some of our peer programs. But for us, it is very specific. It is very intentional that we do ask that you are very specific. Of course, you can be flexible and, you know, multiple companies in that specific industry, or maybe you're specific about a certain function, but like the industry you're open to, and that's okay. But for the purposes of the application, we really do need you to fill in the blank and be a little bit more specific. The other essay is the one that I had already alluded to, our impact essay, which again, we're very, very thoughtful about including in our application for admission. The reason why is because the real common thread among the students in the MBA program here at Johnson is an authentic and organic desire to give back. They're very much actively looking for ways to contribute and get involved and lead different organizations. So we're really hoping to have a class of students at Johnson that want to leave some sort of legacy or lasting impact, or make Johnson a better place than they found it when they leave. So the impact essay does ask our applicants to do a little bit of due diligence and homework and dig into the community and the resources here a little bit, but we really do believe that it's all for your benefit in the end.
Okay, excellent. And I guess one of the things that I wanted to mention, because I see we're getting some questions in the chat, I neglected to say at the outset that as soon as we get through the main segment here, each of our panelists are going to move into little Zoom breakouts. And so anyone who's joined us today can go and ask individual questions of our panelists, and they're going to stick around to do that. So for now, our advice is just hold on to your questions, and then you can ask them directly of the school panelists when we get to the end. Chelsea, just one quick follow-up for the language exam. If I'm a non-native English speaker, but I did my undergraduate in a English speaking university, do I still need to take the test, or is that?
That's a great question, Graham. Thank you for that. So the TOEFL or the IELTS is only required for non-native English speakers who do not have a English speaking degree. So if you completed your undergraduate degree, I think it's anything over 1 year of study, and the medium of instruction was English, you do not need to take the TOEFL or the IELTS. You can qualify for a waiver. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm glad I asked that. Okay, excellent. So let's move on and talk with Megan a little bit about Tuck's application process. And again, just so everyone remembers, the goal is, Megan, yeah, just tell us a little bit about what makes your process different, anything you want to kind of highlight here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for this thoughtful overview, Clear Admit team. So I won't go into depth on all of these, but I wanted to touch briefly on standardized tests and the application fee fee. We do have application fee waivers available, and you'll see here we do have a GMAT or GRE test waiver. We do accept the GMAT as well as all forms of the GRE general test. We are not taking the EA at this time. But waivers are actually something you need to apply for ahead of time before submitting your application. Those requests should be submitted 10 to 12 days ahead of an application deadline here at Tuck. So definitely something you want to plan for early. Similarly, application fee waivers, something you want to apply for early here at Tuck. So do be mindful of that as you're kind of doing your research and kind of thinking about your timeline here. Our bar, similar to Johnson, is quite high for granting those waivers for the GRE or GMAT. So be thoughtful about whether or not that's the right option for you to submit. I really want to drill in a little bit on some of the more narrative sections of the application, which would be our essays, as well as the interview. So essays, we have 3 here at Tuck, so we are going to make you write a little bit more than some of our peer schools here. We ask for a short goal statement in your application itself. We'll ask for both your short-term and your long-term goals. Your short-term goals should really be grounded in reality. What do you want to do immediately post-MBA? And those long-term goals should be lofty. Where do you see yourself kind of launching your career to in the future? Your essays really touch on 2 of our admissions criteria that I mentioned earlier. And that would be aware and encouraging. And I saw someone noted in the chat that those values really resonated with them. I think they're a really central piece of sort of the fabric of Tuck. So we really kind of dive into those on the essays. So essay 1 asks you to talk about why the MBA is right for you, sort of why Tuck in particular is the right program for you, and why right now is the right time for you to be pursuing the MBA. I think the inflection point is different for folks depending on where they're at in their careers or their personal lives, but we really ask you to kind of unpack sort of those 3 pillars of your thinking as you look forward into the future as part of essay 1. Essay 2 sort of asks for some reflection. So kind of looking backwards, it's going to ask you who you are, which I know is a tall order for 300 words or less. But there we're really asking you to reflect on how your values and experiences have shaped your identity and character. You know, who's showing up on day 1 of orientation here at Tuck, and how will you contribute to the diverse Tuck community because of those experiences. I think this essay can be a great place to highlight things maybe outside of work. You have a lot of space in the application through your resume, through letters of recommendation, where some of those professional accomplishments come through. So often this can be a great place to touch on community involvement, personal experiences, lived experiences that have shaped sort of your perspective and how you see the world. And then essay 3, we're in the process of polishing up our essays for this year, but probably will be some version of this next year as well. Kind of asks you to reflect on how you've contributed to someone's sense of inclusion in your professional or personal communities. So here we're really looking for a focused story of your impact on one person or a small group of people. And this really maps directly to our encouraging criterion. So a bit of reflection here in those essays, but we think that's a sort of worthwhile endeavor, both for us, but also for you as you kind of move into the program and think about the Tuck experience and what you hope to both gain from it and bring into it. And then briefly, just on the interview, a couple paths to interview here at Tuck. We do have early interview deadlines for each admissions round. We have 3 admissions rounds here at Tuck. If you apply by one of those early dates, you guarantee yourself the opportunity to have an interview conversation before a member of the admissions committee would review your application. If you apply after those dates by our regular deadlines for each round, it means that a member of the admissions team will review your application first. And then if we're interested in learning more about your candidacy, we'll invite you to interview. There's no preference for either path, so apply when your application is at its strongest. All of our interviews here at Tuck are conducted by second-year students who are paid and trained by the admissions office. They do not know whether you initiated that conversation or if it was at the behest of the admissions committee. So again, kind of take the time you need if you need a little bit more time before kind of submitting your application. I'll pause there, but happy to chat further in breakouts if folks have specific questions on any of these pieces.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. It's very helpful. And I appreciate you giving us a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, because I know, the requirements that we listed here generally tend to be the current cycle, which is kind of just wrapping up. And some of you probably haven't yet unveiled, all your application requirements and details for, candidates who want to start in the fall of 25. Just so our attendees know, most schools will publish their essay topics and application requirements over the summer, sometimes as early as June, sometimes as late as, July, August. So you have to stay tuned there. But it does sound like things are going to be somewhat similar for Tuck, at least going forward. So thanks again, Megan. Let's move on to Nicole and hear a little bit about the application requirements at UNC Kenan-Flagler.
Perfect. Thanks, Graham. So looking at our requirements, they're quite similar as everybody else, so I won't go into too much detail. We do offer the GMAT GRE waiver as well. We do also offer EA assessment, can be considered for getting a waiver as well. We would encourage people to keep their resume to 1 page, and if you haven't, we'll help you do that once you arrive, and to keep it outcome based. As we're business people, it makes it much easier for us to review that resume. The more statistical information you can add or outcomes that you can add, the easier it is for us. The sooner you can get your college transcripts requested, the better. I'm sure we're all in agreement on that one. We do have, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, essays. 2 of them are required. Our first essay, so what I've heard so far will be staying the same. The second one might be changing over the summer. We're still in discussion about that. But the first essay where we ask, what's your plan A and what's your plan B? That really, we do those 2 things. I get asked a lot. Do they have to be married to each other? So does one have to complement the other? And absolutely not. They do not have to. I've had all sorts of fun answers come up with that, somebody wants to be in consulting and then maybe they want to be an entrepreneur and help open an Italian restaurant. So I've had all sorts of very interesting people with lots of great dreams that they put in those essays. And then we have a third essay. It's optional. I recommend filling it out. It's just another opportunity for you to get some information in front of the admissions team. So that can be really anything you want it to be. It's anything that you feel you didn't get asked on the, that you would think you'd be asked in an interview or anywhere on the application that maybe doesn't quite fit in your resume. Maybe you want to talk about your achievements or address some concern that you are really nervous about on your application. We've seen every single use for that essay, and so make it your own. That's absolutely fine. And then letter recommendation, we only need 1, preferably a professional recommendation, not a professor or academic, but if that's what you have, then that's absolutely fine. And then we're the same along with everyone else as far as language exam. Yes, same as Chelsea was talking about for us. If you went to an English speaking program, that's absolutely fine. You do have to have an interview invite after we've processed through our application. We'll send those out. Those are rolling, so people always panic that my friend got one and I didn't get one. We do them as we read, so it's a little bit more spread out as it trickles through. But yes, you do need to either come to campus and interview, or you can do that via Zoom. That's completely up to you. And then we also do have an application fee waiver by attending a couple of events like this and also info sessions that we host online. So those are available for everyone to save $150. So that's it.
Excellent. Thanks, Nicole. I guess one of the things you said that I really want to draw a fine point under is this idea of having a 1-page resume. I think that most of the panelists here will agree that, if you're applying to a full-time MBA program, you usually have less than 10 years of full-time work experience. And the rule of thumb is you should be able to fit everything on a single page. And again, this is a business school application resume. It's maybe a little different from a professional resume, although some would argue that, getting your resume into 1 page is just a good practice period for the MBA experience and recruiting too. So anyway, thanks for, outlining all that. Let's move on. Katie, tell us a little bit about the process at UVA. And I did just want to remind everyone, I know we're getting lots of questions in the chat. Each of our panelists is going to go into a breakout as soon as we get done with the main section, and they will answer your questions there. So hang on to your questions if you can.
Thanks, Graham. I think this is really helpful to see each school's requirements in a row. And hopefully what everyone's seeing is there's a lot more in common than different in the application process. So once you start thinking about pulling together these application materials, you're going to be able to use many of them for every school. So I won't go through all this in detail because you've heard from my colleagues who have had similar requirements. A few things I'll call out that may be a little different at Darden. We do take a wide variety of standardized tests. We do also have an application application test waiver that you can apply for. It's valid for the year in which you intend to enroll for 1 year. So that will go live around the same time our application will go live, sometime in the month of June. So be on the lookout for that, as it does require a few additional steps in advance of actually applying to school. In terms of our short answer questions, these are a place where you really get to show your personality. You get to show how you think, experiences you've had, what you're hoping for in your future. It's both retrospective and forward-looking through these 3 different short answers. And so, one of them, it's pretty lighthearted. We want to know things about you that aren't on your resume. You're way more than your professional and academic life. Tell us about some of the things you care about. We want to know. Another is again, a little bit more retrospective in terms of an experience you've had really promoting an inclusive environment for those around you. So want to see what type of contributor you're going to be to the Darden community, which is so community focused and interactive. And then third is more around those professional goals, learning more about your short and long-term goals, and so you have a place to share that with us. And then I'll jump forward a little and share more about the interview process, because I think that while it's really easy to kind of think about these nuts and bolts of the application, the interview is not too far in your future either. At Darden, we have 4 rounds of admission. In our early action round, it's an open interviewing scheduling period. So encourage anyone applying for early action to schedule that interview as soon as those become available, usually late July, early August, those will go live. There is limited availability for those open interview times, but really gives applicants a chance to get to share more about themselves and go ahead and get to know the admissions committee member that's interviewing them during that early action round. And then during rounds 1 through 3, it's by invitation only. You'll be interviewed by a member of the admissions committee or a current student, second-year student, who's in an interviewing elective with us. We interview on grounds at Darden in Charlottesville. We interview virtually, and then we'll have interviews in select domestic cities in person too. So you may have some optionality in where you get to have that conversation. But as you're kind of thinking more about what you want to share, we'll get to this a little later, but the schools are asking you the questions in the application. You're answering what we've asked. And then you get to the interview, and that's where you get to maybe share some of the things you were hoping to convey that maybe haven't come up yet. So be thinking about all the different elements of yourself that you're going to want to communicate and the time at which that's going to happen in this process.
Excellent. I'm glad you touched on that, because you're right. It comes up quickly, the interview, even though it's sort of later in the process. It all happens fast. So Laurel, you've been really patient as always with Yale being at the end of the alphabet. Can you tell us a little bit about your process and anything you want to kind of call our attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to call out 5 things that are a little bit different about our process, and I'll spend the most time on the essay and tease the others for anyone who might have further questions about them in the breakout. But I can confirm we are settled with our essays for the coming year. They'll stay the same as last year. And we actually have just one essay that we ask you to answer, but you get a choice of 3 different prompts. And those are to describe the biggest commitment you've ever made, describe the community that's been most meaningful to you, and to describe the most significant challenge you have faced. And I see this set of prompts as really reflective of what we value as a community at Yale. As I mentioned before, the mission of Yale SOM is to educate leaders for business and society. And so we want to bring people into the community who care about making an impact. And those sorts of people tend to be self-reflective. They're the sorts of people who learn from their experiences, who see something through the end, even when it isn't easy. And I think these 3 prompts give 3 slightly different, although potentially overlapping, opportunities to show us how you've approached something of real importance, of real meaning in your life. We're big believers in SOM admissions that the best predictors of how you'll behave in the future are how you've behaved in the past, and how you've learned from and responded to past experiences. And so this is a component of our application that allows you to showcase just that, and to talk about something that's really meaningful to you. So those are the essays. The other things I'll call out are our video questions. And so those are a series of 3 prompts that you'll have after you've submitted your application. You'll see a recorded member of my team asking you a question. You'll have 20 to 30 seconds to think about a response, depending on the question. And then again, depending on the question, either 60 or 90 seconds to deliver a response. It's not meant to be trick questions or anything, any cases or anything like that. It's really just gives us an opportunity both to assess English language skill. We don't have an English testing requirement. This gives us a live sample of your English language ability, and also more generally just how you articulate yourself on your feet, which is an important quality in certainly in an MBA classroom and probably in life more generally. So video questions comes after the application. Same goes for the behavioral assessment, which is an online assessment of your interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. Unlike a GMAT or a GRE, it's a non-cognitive assessment, so it's getting at a different sort of skills, and happy to talk more about it later, but we actually use it in a probably different sort of way than you might expect. It actually helps us identify skills that we know are predictive of better classroom performance for candidates who might bring a less strong academic history. So it actually lets us take some more chances on candidates who might not otherwise have the strongest testing or academic history, but have other skills and traits that, that are indicative of being able to thrive in the classroom. The two other things I'll call out, which aren't on this list, but I think are worth considering, are we have a pretty extensive background information section, which is entirely optional, but it's where we get a lot of context about who you are, how you grew up, where you grew up, and the sorts of circumstances which may have impacted the opportunities that you had along the way. So be sure to give yourself some time to go through those questions and be able to present a more fulsome picture of you and your own background. And the last thing I'll call out is, in addition to your resume, we have a pretty extensive work experience section. My tip here is don't leave that to the last minute. We ask a lot of questions about the different employment experiences that you've had, and it takes a little while to fill out. I think it's well worth it and allows you to present a little bit more of a holistic view of your career trajectory. But again, my tip is don't leave that to the last minute. Thinking that that will be sort of a quick entry. Definitely give yourself some time. I actually think it might help guide how you put together a resume, having gone through the exercise of answering some of these questions. So you may even want to tackle that beforehand.
Excellent. So you're actually making a really good point, which is, I view the work experience section and maybe even some of the background info as falling into that umbrella of what we call here like the online application. And most schools have that. And I think most candidates underestimate the amount of work that you're going to need to put into that part of the application. And it's not rocket science, but it's this question of being able to list like, oh, what are my exact dates of employment, salaries, title, responsibilities, accomplishments within each job. And many of you ask for those things in slightly different ways, or some of you may just require a resume, but I see a lot of applications where, it just takes time. And so I appreciate you underlining that, Laurel, because you don't want to leave this for the night before the app's due, which I've seen many candidates make that mistake. All right, let's move on though, because we're gonna we have a bunch of questions we want to get to before we move into the breakouts. So the next thing that I wanted to do is that we have these questions that actually came from our audience, and I've just assigned them to each of you. So we're going to start with you, Chelsea. And this question is fittingly about the resume. Most candidates have a version of their resume that they've used, whether it's to get a job or whatever, or to update their LinkedIn profile. Anything that you would recommend that they change aside from getting it onto one page before they get into the application process?
Yeah, Graham, thank you. And I love that we've started talking about this already, but applicants really should be thoughtful about their resume as a priority when they're preparing for business school applications. And I always say you really should create a new resume for your MBA applications. You should not apply to business school with the same resume that you use to apply for jobs in your industry. Most of the time, it's very technical. It might have language on it that someone outside of your industry can't really digest or comprehend the same way. And so like, pro tip, you can Google business school resume templates, and lots of programs like post theirs publicly so you can download them. I would rather see an applicant be a little bit more resourceful and find some of those resources to reformat their resume specifically for MBA applications. We ask all of our incoming students during the matriculation process to reformat their resume anyway into a business school format. So you're maybe getting a little bit of a jump start there with the reformatting piece. But yes, as Graham mentioned, please keep it to one page if you're under the 10 years of work experience, and make sure that when you format it, it's easily digestible by someone outside of your industry. Try and quantify your achievements rather than listing out your list of day-to-day responsibilities and tasks, making sure that someone can really understand your impact and your achievements and your growth that you've had, sort of your full trajectory from your first place of employment to your most recent position that you've held. If there's any gaps or holes in your experience, maybe 3 to 6 months or higher, make sure that you're talking about those either in the applicant work history section of the application or in your optional essay.
Okay, excellent. And I actually just remembered, you've reminded me, ClearAdmit actually has on our website a little resume guide with a template, and it just sort of shows people how an MBA resume often looks, and it's free, so you can get it on the website. Or I assume, as you say, just Google it and you'll probably find something. I think the resume is such a great starting point when you're thinking about business school, because it's just a way to kind of crystallize all the components of your candidacy into like a single greatest hits, page. So it's a good place to start. Let's move on to our next question, which is for Megan at Tuck. Essay writing can be daunting. What advice do you have for applicants who aren't sure where to start when it comes to this element?
Yeah, so I think for me, this always boils down to kind of two different pieces, one being introspection and then the other being sort of research. So on the introspection piece, I often counsel folks, even before you get into any school's essays, take a minute to sit down with yourself, reflect on sort of what brings you to the MBA, sort of where you want to go with this experience. What are 2 to 3 things that are really central to your being and your person that you think is critical for an admissions committee to know about you as you get into our different application processes. If there's not somewhere that you can represent that information in our application, that's probably something you want to touch on in your essays. So I think just kind of taking some time to sit with yourself, talk to trusted colleagues, mentors about some of the things that maybe they've seen in you, growth they've seen in you, things that really set you apart for them can be a good exercise before you even get too far into the weeds. With that said, I would encourage you to get into the weeds. So kind of do your research. As you've heard from all of us, our application processes differ quite a bit. We all have different tacks when it comes to the format of our essays, what exactly we're looking for. We spend a lot of time crafting our questions to kind of get at the criteria for our specific programs. So use our good resources on our websites, on our blogs, in events, to learn about our essays, to understand what we're asking. I think what you don't want to do when it comes to essay writing is shoehorn one school's prompt into another school's essay. So really take some time to understand our schools and our programs, talk to our students, especially those who might be interested in what you want to do post MBA, to understand how our particular school's resources can support you in getting there. I think you heard from all of us, we almost all ask about your goals, why MBA and why our specific program. So, do some research both on the admission side of things, but also in how our school is going to help you kind of reach the potential you would like to see post MBA.
Excellent advice. And I think, yeah, that idea of trying to take one school's essay and make it work for another school's prompt is a bad idea. So it's really, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I also love what you're saying about making that kind of taking like a personal inventory and thinking about what are the stories that you have to tell before you even, look at the essay questions. What are some of the things that you really might want to convey? All right, moving right along, we have another question, and this one's about career goals, and it's for Nicole at Kenan-Flagler. And, I know you guys have this A-B kind of path too in your application, but what is it that you're like, what's the level of specificity that you're looking for when you ask someone about their goals? And do my goals have to align with what I've done in the past, or is it okay to, have a goal that's completely different from what I'm doing now?
Yeah, I would say, obviously we see both quite often. Personally, for me, in meeting with the career team, had some really good conversations about the students that are the most successful. Our students who come in who are very flexible. They come into the program, they have an idea of what they want to do, but they let themselves be open to it. But I know that you obviously have to get into the program first before you can get there. I would say having, obviously knowing your why in MBA, but really is this MBA going to help you and make it make sense for us, connect the dots, because we definitely want to make sure that you're coming here and that we can help you ultimately achieve your career goals after you graduate. That's really, really important to us. So it doesn't necessarily have to align, but I have to make sure that the dots will connect to get you there. So that's why we ask the AB question, like, okay, what's your dream job, right? Like what, and then maybe another one where, hey, okay, this is more like, if this one doesn't work out, I'm also kind of interested in this, but I may not know that much about it. Well, great, come to school, learn about it. You've got 2 years to figure it out. So it's more making sure that we can help you achieve that at the end. So I would say be specific enough to let us know if we can help you with what you're trying to do. And that's where the resume comes into play too, to really see. And as someone else said, using a bunch of jargon that I won't be able to understand. I need to know more about your EQ and IQ as well, along with the interview, so that I can make sure that we can get you where you want to go. So yeah, I think do it just enough to make sure that you could explain to a random person, you know, this is what I want to do and here's my why behind it, and then make
Yeah.
sure that we can help you get there.
Okay. Yeah, that all makes sense. And I do think that people who show up in business school with a potential plan often, yeah, they're a little bit they seem more ready to tackle, you know, the curriculum and the opportunities. But you don't want to be so rigid, as you say, that you can't move, you know, change course if you need to. So great advice. Let's move on to Katie from Darden. We have a question about interviews, which is really funny because you talked a little bit about in the interview process at Darden earlier, but this is, you know, kind of a different way of looking at it. But what is it that you learn when you interview a candidate that you couldn't get from the written application?
Thanks, Graham. Interviews are one of my favorite parts of the process, so I'm glad to get to talk about it a second time. An interview is a distinct element of your evaluation for business school that is different from what we learn through that written application. A lot of what we're going to be evaluating is around your communication and interpersonal skills. You may be able to communicate that on paper one way, and then you can really make it come alive when you actually talk about it. We get to hear your passion, your personality. We get to hear you provide more examples of how you've grown or what your dreams are. You're able to really become a 3D person in a way that on paper is just a little bit harder to get a full picture. And so, you know, see the interview as a real opportunity to get to share more about yourself. Should, you know, give us a great reason to be excited to have you join the class. We want to know those whys, just like Nicole was just talking about in your goals. You know, what's the reason behind the answers you've given us so far? That being said, it's really important to know your audience in an interview too, that you may have a student you're interviewing with, or perhaps it's a staff member or alum. Know who you're talking to, because you're going to tailor perhaps your tone and your questions differently depending on that audience. So, you know, we're going to see those reflections back after the interview on how that went. And we want to know that you really understood the assignment. Every school is going to have a slightly different format. Some may be completely anonymous. They may not know much about you walking in. Others are going to have fully digested your application. Really understand that so that you're making good use of that time in the interview and able to convey the most important things that you want to make sure are throughout this process, and that you're asking great questions too. We want to see your curiosity and passion for our schools.
Yeah, and I think you're making a really great point about, yeah, just this knowing your audience, because as you point out, some schools use second year students, some schools use alumni, admission staff, and so knowing who you're going to be speaking with can be helpful in terms of tailoring how you prepare. One more question we have from the audience that I wanted to ask Laurel at Yale, and this is kind of an interesting one. It's about, you know, life happens. Like sometimes, you know, we maybe don't do so well at work or in school. And so what would you say to a candidate who maybe has like a low GPA, or maybe they got laid off at work, and like how do they convey this stuff without it sort of you know, ruining their candidacy?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked this question, because I think candidates often struggle with how much of this to share out of fear that highlighting something will maybe bring something to the attention of the committee that we otherwise wouldn't have had questions about. But I would absolutely encourage you to be straightforward about the challenges that you faced and the potentially weaker components of your application. Let us understand the circumstances around them, and to the extent that you have been working to mitigate any of them, we want to know that as well. I think we all have some form of an opportunity to answer, to give sort of an optional statement or to address any component of your application that requires a little bit more information. So I would absolutely encourage you to take advantage of that. My advice there is to be brief and be specific. So we don't necessarily need an entire other essay on why your performance during one semester wasn't as strong as you wanted it to be. Really kind of home in on the key kind of factors that you want to highlight, and being specific. If an event that you're describing or circumstance that you're describing had an impact on a specific area of your career trajectory or a specific time within your undergraduate history, it's really helpful for you to connect those dots and for us to be able to say, okay, this thing was going on in this applicant's life during this year of undergrad. Let me look at the transcript and see if that is in fact corroborated. So make it as straightforward for us as possible to kind of understand the impact of the situation that you're outlining.
Yeah, excellent. And I would say, remember, the folks on this panel and everyone in admissions are really good at their job in terms of reading your file. And so if there is something that happened, like a weak semester, you're better off explaining it in the optional essay, or just owning it and being out in front, because it's not like you can sort of slip something past these readers. Like they know how to read a file, and yeah. So just keep that in mind too. Always better to, you don't want an admissions officer to have to play detective and sort of be like, oh, what happened here? So all right. So we have one more section, and then we're going to send our panelists into the breakouts. And what we're going to do is we have 3 lightning round questions, but we're going to start with Laurel, since she's been patient and had to go last every time. We're going to start with Yale this time, and we're going to have you answer all 3 of the lightning round questions, and we'll just go through the group that way, because I think that'll keep us more on time. So Laurel, describe the Yale admissions team in 3 words.
I go with innovative, humble, and inclusive.
Okay, excellent. And then our next lightning round question for you is, and I think, we have a slide on this that's coming up. I think it's, yeah, so naming the wrong school in an essay is a classic cringy mistake that applicants make. What's another kind of don't that you would want to call out here?
Yeah. Don't read off of a script for either your video questions or your interview if you're doing it over Zoom. No matter how seamless you think it's coming off, it's not. We would much prefer a genuine response than something being read.
Yeah, excellent point. And then our last one for you, Laurel, is just tell us about something coming up on campus that you're looking forward to.
Well, we just had commencement, so our campus is definitely going to be a lot quieter than in recent weeks. But this is when I think the city of New Haven really comes alive. And so we have coming up in early June something called the Festival of Arts and Ideas that brings together a lot of local and further afield performers and thought leaders, and just a month-long celebration that obviously, people who are still hanging around in New Haven over the summer are welcome to come to, but us residents look forward to every year.
Oh, that sounds like fun. All right, so let's go to Katie. We're going to go backwards through the alphabet. Katie, give me the Darden admissions team in 3 words.
I love these questions. This is so fun. I'm going to say accessible, global, and fun.
Okay. And I realize now that as we go on, it's going to get harder and harder for each of our panelists to come up with new words. But give me a mistake that candidates make that you want to just call out here so that they don't make it when they apply to Darden or anywhere else.
I think don't edit out your personality when you're writing those essays. It's okay to show us more of yourself, what you think, what you believe in. Show that fun side. You don't have to just give the cookie cutter answers. We want to know really what you think.
Got it. All right. Excellent. Is that another way of saying don't use ChatGPT to write stuff? No, just kidding. Just kidding. All right.
I'll leave that to the individual.
Yeah. Yes. No. All right. And then something you're looking forward to that's going to happen in Charlottesville.
Well, like Laurel, we just had graduation this last weekend, and we are already on the countdown to our orientation and opening week that start at the end of July. And I think we are really excited to welcome all our international students, and really under 2 months, and then get the rest of the class here by the start of August. So countdown's on.
Yeah, I totally get that. I know after you've read files and have admitted a class, like you're just dying to meet them all and have them get to campus. So it's like the most rewarding feeling. All right, so let's move on, and now we're going to talk with Nicole. Same thing, Nicole. UNC Kenan-Flagler. How would you describe the team?
I would say empathetic, encouraging, and fair. would be my
Okay, excellent. All right. What about a mistake people need to avoid?
Surprisingly, people have uploaded documents called the right thing, but there's something else that they definitely didn't want us to see. So just double checking whatever you send to us as a PDF, just triple checking everything, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, good advice. And finally, anything happening on campus at UNC that you're looking forward to?
We're getting a new building, a brand new business school. So it's going to be opening for the students for next year. So we're watching it be built every single day and hearing it as well. So I'm ready for that to also be finished, but really looking forward to it.
And it's right next to the current one, I guess, if you can
Yes,
hear it from your,
yes.
okay. All right, got it. Excellent. All right. And now let's turn to Megan. Megan, the Tuck admissions team in 3 words.
Yeah, I'll reflect one of our admissions criteria in encouraging, but then I think also approachable and thorough.
Okay, excellent. And how about something that you want candidates to avoid, a cringy mistake or don't in the process?
Yeah, I sometimes hate giving y'all don'ts because I think this is already an anxiety-provoking process. So maybe a do is read our websites, use these good resources. I know I'm a broken record at this point, but we spend a lot of time putting out material to help you be successful in the application process. So please use it. It's evident when you don't. Take the time to do some of that research.
Yeah, and I guess just to one thing, as some of you know, ClearAdmit does a lot of research, and it does turn out that candidates do rely on your websites. I mean, it is the primary source of information, but I hear you when you say like read the finer points because it can be very helpful as they travel through the process. Last but not least, something coming up in Hanover or on the Dartmouth campus that you're excited about?
Yeah, so I'll echo, we've got graduation and matriculation of new students coming up, but I'll project us into the future. We have some awesome fall visit opportunities in the form of conferences run by our students for you all. So a diversity conference, a women in business conference, a military visit day. So lots of fun things on the horizon in the fall on campus for you all who are thinking about, Tuck next year.
Okay, great. I'm guessing that people could go to the website to learn about those events. So we'll send them there. All right. Last but not least, Chelsea, thanks for being patient as we went backwards through the alphabet. Tell us, how would you describe your team in 3 words?
Yeah, a little bit of overlap here, but fun, approachable, and dedicated would be my 3.
Okay, excellent. Any kind of mistake that you want to give people a tip around?
Yeah, my least favorite thing is when dates don't align, or if people will use very general timelines on their resume, like 2021 to 2024, but then when I dig into the history section or in the interview, it turns out that there's actually gaps in those months. Be specific with your timelines. Don't try to hide anything from us or give me like a date discrepancy that will cause me more questions. That's my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah, that was a total pet peeve of mine when I used to read files. And as I said earlier, we are talking about like, don't make the admissions officer play detective, which is what you're kind of describing, this idea of like having to like figure out, wait, where were they when? And some programs, I don't know if any of you do this, but I know that some programs do background checks after you've admitted someone. You might actually look into the employment dates of employment or verify the salaries or check with the recommenders. So best to be upfront and give everyone the details that are requested. And then last but not least, is there anything coming up in Ithaca or on the Cornell campus that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, Ithaca is, Finger Lakes region here is absolutely beautiful during the summer months. So really looking forward to getting outside, doing some hiking, visiting some wineries, but it would be a missed opportunity if I did not say graduation, which is happening this weekend.
Oh, wow. Cool. Okay. So you guys have a little bit later graduation than some of our other panelists. Excellent. So what we're going to do now is we're going to thank our panelists and we're going to let them slip out into their Zoom breakouts. I want to ask all the attendees to stay here with me just for another minute or two because we want to give our panelists a moment to get set up. But I did want to sincerely thank Chelsea, Megan, Nicole, Katie, and Laurel. Really appreciate you guys making time. And good luck chatting with everyone who I'm sure is going to flood your breakout rooms with questions. So thanks for hanging out a little bit longer. We'll let you kind of step. I think you can go backstage and then get into your breakouts, or we'll move you into your breakouts. In the meantime, so thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it. In the meantime, for those of you who've joined us, just give our panelists a minute. They have to get set up in their breakouts. And while you're waiting, I'm going to give you some tips that I'm hoping will be useful to you as you start, working on your applications. Just 4 tips here. The first is to aim for high scores. So if you are taking a test, which in most cases is going to be recommended, it's smart to, just do the best that you can, right? Put your best foot forward. Many people take these tests more than once. So budget time. If you need to take the GRE or the GMAT more than once, that's totally fine. No one looks down on someone who's taken the test twice, especially when that score goes up. Apply in the round when your application is really at its peak or most ready. There are some exceptions to this rule, like if you're in an overrepresented portion of the candidate pool, you may want to apply early. But otherwise, don't apply until you're ready. Make sure that you really have done the reflection and got your essays and everything together, so that you put your best foot forward. Um, the third one here, sorry, is engage the community as you research. And you could probably tell from what our panelists were saying that you really, there are a lot of opportunities to connect with current students, sometimes with alumni or even with the admissions staff. So attend events like this, go to the individual school events online, just engage, because the more you learn about these programs, the more that will be reflected in your applications. And that relates to this last point, which is that by learning about these schools and engaging with their community, it's going to be that much easier for you to demonstrate interest. And that goes a long way. I mean, these schools want to know that you're likely to attend if they admit you, and that you've done the homework. So as I let you guys drift off into the breakouts, I just wanted to remind you that on the ClearAdmit website, you can fill out an apply wire entry, which is a tool we have that allows you to kind of put in your goals and your target schools and get feedback. And it's free. You just post it, it's anonymous as well. So you post your profile, some facts and figures, and our team will give you feedback. So if you haven't done that yet, you should definitely do so. You can just go to our website and it's /apply wire. Otherwise, you can now, you should be able to bounce into the breakouts. And yeah, just really appreciate everyone who's made time. We are doing this again next week, and the schools joining us next week are Carnegie Mellon, Columbia, Wharton, INSEAD, and London Business School. So I'll be back next week. I'm hoping many of you will be back as well. And thanks so much for making time. I know a lot of you, it's late at night or early in the morning, so appreciate everyone making time. And now, yeah, enjoy your additional time with the schools as you head into the breakouts. So thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you hopefully next week.